Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey guys, welcome back to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, Alan Bishop, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest. As always, I'm here to answer your questions about home distillation and or legal distillation or any type of distillation. Send me your questions at bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, the YouTube comments below, or anywhere on social media. As long as I see them, and when and as I have time, I will answer those questions. As you guys probably know if you've been following me, I've been pretty busy with my new place, Old Homestead Distillery over in Crawford County. We are doing some really amazing things over there. I have always wanted to take the things that I've developed and implement them in a legal distillery in a way that I wanted to do it, but I saved the best for this place. And some of the theories I've had about distilling on a larger scale, I'm being able to prove out now with what we are doing, particularly using the 250-gallon still we call Artemisia and a double thumper system, which is, people talk about three-chamber building oils. Tell you what, this double thumper system, it really builds some oils and makes some heavy duty distillate, and I'm very excited about it. But had a few minutes here today on a Sunday afternoon to answer a few questions you guys have sent me via email, so let's get right into them. So from my buddy Jeff: hey Alan, just watched your most recent video on YouTube today at One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute, and you said you didn't have any viewer questions. Below are two questions. Number one, many months ago, you and I were discussing a fermentation that we were having trouble with that consisted of a mash bill of approximately 70% pale malt, 10% chocolate malt, 10% cherrywood smoked malt, and 10% caramel malt 60L. The fermentation stopped somewhere around a gravity of 1.025. What specifically causes these fermentations with a mash bill containing a certain percentage of specialty malts to not ferment out dry or even close to dry? That's a really good question. Number two, in one of your Facebook posts, I believe you used the phrase deflag the bump tails. What does that mean exactly, and in what type of situation would that be employed? All right, well, let's start with number one. So those specialty malts, you have to remember, those are brewer's malts, so they have a low diastatic power to begin with. They are never going to convert themselves fully, and they are never going to convert anything else fully. On top of that, because of their low amount of power to cause conversion through the various processes, diastatic processes, and they are being roasted. That's what specialty malts are. They're roasted and or toasted to different degrees. Whatever enzymes that they actually have been destroyed. Now there's sugar there, that's where the sugar comes from. But sugar and fermentable sugars are two separate things. So if you're making a single malt mash bill out of these specialty grains that have been toasted or roasted to different degrees, and you're fermenting those with nothing else that hasn't been toasted or roasted, you're never going to fully convert those sugars, because a lot of those sugars are completely unfermentable. They give great flavors, usually in small quantities is what you want them in. 10% maybe at the most, sometimes a little bit more. Oftentimes you get the flavor that you want from those various different malts at lower percentages, like 5%, 2%, 3%, somewhere in there. But in high percentages, yes, there's going to be sugar left in the barrel. And as we all know, sugar left in the barrel is money left on the table, as it were to be said. So those specialty malts are never going to give you full conversion, for sure, ever. And you just have to plan for that when you're building your mash bill, and you have to account for that with your quality and those sort of things, and how much yield are you willing to sacrifice for a certain flavor that you are after. In terms of the phrase deflag the bump tails, so a deflag, as many of you may know, is a deflator, a type of small condenser that sets at the top of your still column before the vapor outlet, and you run more or less cold water through it, and that causes condensation to fall back into the still where you have vapor alcohol. It meets liquid alcohol, and an exchange happens. The proof and purity goes up. You drop out certain flavors. Those can be positive or negative flavors depending on what you're after, again, and how much purity you want, and can be or cannot be run in conjunction with plates. So what are some examples of tuning a deflator? And that's what you would call it, tuning it. The amount of water going in or out, usually done via a needle valve. Some examples would be if you're running a vodka and you start to see the proof jump down or fall down pretty quick, because a lot of times at those high proofs, you got to remember there's only so much alcohol in there. Once you hit the quote-unquote tails, it'll nosedive. Oftentimes if you bump that deflator, hit it with a little more cold water than what was running in it before, you'll raise the proof and purity, and you'll get rid of those tails by compressing them into higher proof alcohol and dropping out the substances that you don't want. Now, eventually, on any sort of batch system, any sort of pot system where you're not running continuously new mash into the system, there is a line that you won't be able to cross, right? There's only so much alcohol in there. You can only get so much alcohol back out of it. But often you can compress those tails into usable alcohol. Where I often use this method is if I'm doing a single pass distillation with a plate or multiple plates, not even for vodka, but say for lighter style whiskeys or moonshines or brandies. Once I hit that point where I know I'm getting ready to drop in the tails and I'm seeing the proof drop off pretty rapidly, I'll often tune that deflag and get a little bit more volume out of the material that's there by compressing those tails. Also, this was done commonly on absinthe stills. So you would literally get right to where you were thinking that you were going to cut into tails on absinthe, usually about 120 proof or so, hit that deflag and bump it back up maybe to 130 or so and get just a little bit more volume out of it, a little bit more flavor out of it, instead of letting that pass into the tails or the blanquette on absinthe. So hopefully that kind of answers your questions, but let me jump back here in my email, and it might take me just a second, but I know there's some more questions in here that I've gotten. Give me just 1 second, guys. Let's see what we've got. I should have been more ready to do this, but you know how that goes. All right, let's see. All right, so from Nige, hi Alan, many thanks for sharing your knowledge with us, and good luck with new distillery. Thank you. My next question is about used barrels and what, if any, preparation you do in a distillery to ready them for the next use, and if you change your process depending on what was in them, how long they have been in use, or how long they have been empty. I'm guessing at bare minimum you must fill them with water and swell them to check for leaks, but I'm curious to hear what you do. Well, it depends. So as I've said many times, I'm not a big fan of wet barrels for finishing any product, right? If you're using a quote-unquote wet barrel, which is to me defined as a used barrel of any product that still has a gallon or two rolling around in it, I see zero difference between you putting a whiskey or a brandy or whatever in that barrel and calling it finished versus you actually just putting that into a barrel and adding a gallon or two of that product to it. It's a cheat at best. Now, if you want to do that and not call it a finished whiskey, but actually do a DSS and you're completely honest with your consumer about what you're doing, I see nothing wrong with that whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I encourage it because that's innovative stuff. But when you are in a legal gray area in terms of commercial distilleries doing that, and you're going to call that a finished whiskey, yeah, you can kiss both sides of my ass. I like finishing barrels to be completely dry. The only product I want in them is whatever is stuck in the wood. And there will always be some residual flavor stuck in that wood. But all I want is just a hint of that flavor to come through to balance with the whiskey or the brandy that I'm finishing. In terms of how I treat my used barrels that come in, it depends. Most often, you're getting fresh dumped barrels that have been emptied of everything that was in them. But because they are fresh dumped and they're only, say, a month or two old, they usually don't need any work done to them to tighten them back up or to even add water to them to swell them back up. It's only when they set for extended periods of time that you need to actually add water to them in order to swell them back up to get them to hold liquid. Very rarely does that happen within the industry. I would prefer when I'm getting a used barrel like that, just like I like them to be dry on the inside, I also do not want to have to swell them with water because then that water is going to be extracting some of that flavor of the product that was previously in there. Now there's two ways to look at, used barrels. You can look at them as just being a vessel for secondary maturation, or perhaps if they're a very old barrel that's been used many times, maybe they're a neutral barrel that holds something like absinthe for, a few months to let it sort of mellow out. More often than that, they are a device for also adding flavor and or, various different components of what was in them previously. So for me, I don't want them at the point where they're falling apart unless I'm going to rebuild them and use them to mash in. We're doing open top fermentation there at Old Homestead Distillery. If it's in that bad a shape, it's probably not something I'm going to put spirits in the first place. So I prefer barrels that are fresh dumped, they've only been setting for a couple months, and that I can immediately fill and not have to put any water in them and not have to hurt them in any way, shape, or form. The only other preparations that I do is when I get the barrels in, I take a look at them. What's their general condition? Is there anything for concern? Pop that bung open, give it a smell, make sure there's nothing weird there. And always with wine barrels, make sure that it's not been treated with any sort of sulfur, as you do not want that in your spirits. But otherwise, that pretty much sums up that topic. Let's see, I might have one more here in my email. I know I've had several come in. Let me see what I've got, guys. I do apologize. It's taken me just a little bit to get around to some of these, but we are getting there. So, okay. So from Terry, and he sent some pictures along of a plant growing in his yard. With pictures, is this what I am looking for? Like I said in the previous email, I'm not great with plant identification, but this is growing around my property, and Google says it's sweet wormwood or annual wormwood or ragweed. Does it bloom? And if so, do I need to wait till then to harvest any of it? Thanks again. So if I were going to use annual ragweed for a moonshine in particular, yes, I would let it bloom, and it certainly does bloom. In fact, it is highly allergenic to a lot of people here in the Ohio Valley. This is one of the causes of hay fever, but that's also where you're going to get the vast majority of those aromatic principles that are going to be similar to grand wormwood. So if I were going to use this particular plant in an absinthe, I would wait until it bloomed to harvest it. I would also wear some sort of respirator and or dust mask to try to avoid inhaling any more of that than what you possibly can. So another one from my buddy Bob down in Costa Rica. So, hey Alan, thanks for your recent information about malting sunflower seeds. I used them in a recent fermentation. We'll have some results in the next couple weeks. Regarding tomato paste and fermentations, what are your thoughts about it? Do you consider it an emergency procedure or completely viable routine process? I know people do it. They do it all the time. I don't do it. For me, tomatoes have a very particular flavor. They come through in distillation. I do know that some people do make tomato brandy, and more power to them. It is not my thing, but enjoy. Go for it. I don't, therefore, use tomato paste as a nutrient. Generally, I find that people are often using nutrients when they don't need to be using them. Specifically in grain fermentations, it should not be necessary. There's more than enough nitrogen within that grain fermentation to not be an issue. But even if you do feel like you need some nutrients, I certainly think that there are better options out there, and options that are just as cheap, just about as easy to get a hold of nowadays. Anything with nitrogen in it, and I'm not advising this, but I will tell you one of the old distillers' tricks across the United States back in the day and throughout Europe. They throw a little chicken shit into their fermentations. Now, I don't do that. I would not do that. Just saying, though. I mean, anything that has nitrogen in it, it's going to feed that yeast and be just fine. But it's not something I use, not something I would want to use. And I feel the same way about tomato paste in my fermentations and distillations. There's better stuff out there. Most of it I can find, within the grain itself. It's not needed, and on a commercial basis, something like superfood, at a quarter of the recommended dosage is more than enough most of the time to get a very fast, very vigorous fermentation that has no issues whatsoever. So anyways, guys, I hope you appreciate the videos. I hope you're liking the stories from the stead stuff that I'm doing as well, because I'm putting a lot of time and effort into that research, trying to get back into my roots as the alchemist of the Black Forest of Southern Indiana and share some of the history of Southern Indiana with you guys. I am currently working on the new Distiller's Almanac. There will be some of those newspaper articles in that Distiller's Almanac. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff in there, a lot of recipes like plum brandy and things like that, talking about the difference between cane sugar and table sugar. There's going to be a Beaver Still review in there. There are going to be predictions for the year 2025, just like the Farmer's Almanac and the Old Farmer's Almanac. They predict weather for the year. I'm getting some folks together from the If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything gang, including my wife Kimberly Marie Bishop, the distiller's wife, to do tarot-based and rune-based and other predictions overall for the world for the year 2025, because I thought that was a nice little slant on it. But as always, you can pick up the two existing books, The Alchemist Cabinet Volume 1 and Volume 2, The Black Forest Method, over at thealchemistcabinet.com. Thank you guys for all your support. I sure do love y'all. I hope you have a great day, and I'll catch you soon.